All right, guys. So this interview is one that I'm looking very much forward to. I didn't know I was going to do it until about half an hour ago or less. And I've been in touch with Nolan the last few weeks. We've had a number of good conversations on the phone. And we talked after Colton posted his story on the transfer of the Hermosa Convention grounds to my parents. And Nolan had one of his friends reach out to me, and he doesn't have Facebook, so reach out to me, and we've talked a number of times over the last few weeks. And I just let him know if he's interested in sharing his story and maybe a little bit more details on not only, that's not the focus of this interview, so not only the transfer of the Hermosa Convention grounds, but just his story. He's a great guy to visit with, and he says a lot of stuff that makes a lot of sense. So I'm excited to be able to do this interview with him. We're in Montana. I came over to his shop for a little bit just to visit, and because I wanted to meet up with him either way, whether he did an interview or not. And so, but he said he does, and so I'm out getting the camera and the mics set up, and then we'll go visit with him for a little bit. So, yeah, this should be good. All right, so he's back in the shop, so we'll go see what he's up to and see what God has done in his life. Did you get it fixed yet?
No, we're gaining, but we're not done.
So here's a mic for you.
Oh, very good. Oh, fuzzy though. Where should I put it?
Oh, it has a clip, so just clip it on there.
Center of the best, maybe?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
So Nolan showed me this sign he's working on for your neighbor.
Yeah, they're neighbors to us. They're it's quite the thing. Yeah, she owns some shops down here. It's husband and wife, and they live up near us. And then they also own a shop here too. So
Okay.
And they graciously let us use their vacant lot next to us as goat pasture. And they're just some awesome people. And she has a Christmas store in Bozeman, and then this is going in the window at some point.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what it was made for. It was an old marketing sign, I think, just to kind of catch people's attention on a Christmas store window.
Yeah, it's super cool. So did you guys celebrate Christmas growing up?
No, we didn't.
Is that a big no-no?
Yeah, I think it kind of was, actually. Yeah. It was just, yeah, I mean, we were understood why we didn't, I guess, put it bluntly.
Yeah. What was the reason that you were given?
What's that?
As far as not celebrating.
As far as not celebrating it? That's a really good question. I'm not sure I have a solid answer.
I was
on
always
that.
told that we didn't celebrate Christmas because we should celebrate every day.
And that would, that was an argument that I can kind of see some logic in. That was, still I should say, can see some logic in that. Why once a year?
Yeah, but we go out of our way though that once a year to not celebrate it. So we can celebrate Christmas 364 days.
Right.
But
Well, it wasn't, and I guess it wasn't that. It wasn't that we really went out of our way to not celebrate it, because there were people. We had friends and neighbors growing up that brought us gifts and.
yeah, and that varies a lot throughout.
And it wasn't. So it wasn't a. It wasn't a let's offend people sort of a rule.
Yeah.
There definitely was not a. I'm going to test that real quick before I. What did I do with my test leads? I think I laid them down over here in this mess. Welcome to my mess. But if I can get that wheel to spin as it's supposed to, that's what's really cool. Whoa. No, still not. Okay. This one, I just need to loosen it so it doesn't. There we go. Now it's flapping like it should. Okay. Make sure I unplug the right one. Yeah, and then we'll come on in. We've got some comfier chairs over here.
How has it changed, if at all?
How has it changed?
Yeah, in the last year.
Well, it has changed a lot. It has changed a lot. It's it's troubling, and it contaminates fellowship for me. That's exactly what it does. Society as a whole is learning. We don't seem to be, as a fellowship.
It's a result of false doctrine.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not that is a symptom. It's not the root. The workers are accustomed to handling everything. Or sweeping everything under the rug, which is what has been the case in some areas.
The works that you do are a result of thankfulness from the work that Christ did.
Exactly.
And so you could see that in others.
Right.
And so that was...
And I saw that in the big caveat to that is that I saw that in others that I didn't go to Sunday morning meeting with. When anyone inserts themselves between us and God, it violates His word. It violates the sanctity of fellowship. It violates the promise that Jesus has made. I've been so comforted by Jesus' words that He'll be with us until the end of the world. If it's something that I'm going somewhere, I'm listening to someone say a lot of things that I'm just not okay with, not in agreement with, but I keep going back and doing that over and over again to show some support or something like that, and then eventually you find out that the conversation is completely one-sided anyway. That's usually how that goes. If we can't enter into the truth of Jesus together, it's not fellowship, it's a fraud. If you call something other than Jesus the way, my question for myself is, how did I not understand how dangerous that was? You set the stage for a striving of an appearance of perfection, and that's the standard the workers have been held to for years. And so that's how the cover-ups happen, is because, well, we can't let on that this happened because people realize it's not perfect. It seems like a chink in the armor. So come on in. We've got some comfier chairs over here. You can have the tall one there. I'll take this ratty old office chair.
I'll come down to your level.
Oh, there you are. I feel better now. Thank you.
So, I appreciate you taking the time to visit and share your story. And
well,
I've heard a lot of your story already because we've been talking. But
yeah, we've covered a little.
Yeah, but it's good. And there was something else I was just going to tell you, and I forgot. Oh, we got to tell everybody kind of where you're at. So you still kind of go to meetings, but not really.
Well, I don't know. That might be a stronger way to put it, but yeah. Let's see. How would we put that? I enjoy fellowship with people who are there for the right reasons and who love God and Jesus, and that's the focus. If that's just, it's just, and this is stuff that I hear people say kind of almost in a platitude sort of way at this point, but it isn't always the case. We know that. There's a lot of distraction, and there's a lot of there's a lot of saying one thing but kind of meaning something different, and it's reappropriation almost of expressions and terminology, things that are found in God's Word and things that we do profess to believe in actuality. But then, but then once it's explained in depth as, this is what we mean by that, or this is what I mean by that, then there becomes this separation often, and that's troubling. It's been very troubling, but it's, yeah, I still enjoy fellowship with a very, I should say, I still enjoy fellowship with quite a number of people, some which are still part of the fellowship, and some who have stepped away, and some who have never been. Some who are just, as we would say, sheep that are not of this fold is what we used to call them. But it's really, I think it's becoming more apparent that at least to some it seems that God is pulling people to Him, drawing people to Him, as He's told us He will. And it doesn't matter where they're at and where they're coming from, as long as He is able to draw them to Himself. That's what He wants. That's what He's asked. So
you had mentioned in our conversations that there's what you call outlaw meetings here, or non-sanctioned meetings.
Well, yeah, I guess they've all got different words for them across. It's happened kind of across the United States in different places, but there's people who have just come to the conclusion that they can't be in support of certain things that don't align, and that they don't find to be doctrinally sound, or things that have been revealed that they're not okay with, and that they can't be okay with. And there's a deep rabbit hole there. Many people take it to a oops, sorry, this little chair just does that. Many people take it to a place of judgment, or to an accusation of judgment, rather. That, and I've kind of heard that out for so many years that now at this point, it's come to a whole different point for me, where it's like, why are we here? Why are we not here on earth?
Why are we going to meetings?
Why would we go to meeting? If you go to meeting, and what you find there is talk involving pride, which is where the people have labeled it different things. For many, it's a form of exclusivity or some form of that. But that is nothing more than a rising up of the pride. We need to feel more special. It's
so you
not
see
good.
that this is the only true way to heaven as prideful.
Let's just put it this way. I think it can be more easily broken down in two simple thoughts that have been very real to me just today, actually this morning, that came to me in reading and praying, that people are very complex. We are not simple creatures. We're very complex creatures. But human nature is very simple. It's a lizard brain. It's a very simple, repetitive mechanism. Its patterns are never unique. We're always reinventing the same wheel. But Satan and the Antichrist is so good at their strategies that they convince us every time that it's our idea. They convince us often that not even that it's our idea. I should rephrase that. They convince us that it's God's idea, because that's what they seek to do is to replace God, to replace Christ, replace God and His Son in our lives. And whenever they can do that, we fall into the same cycles. Jesus came into the middle of a group of people, Pharisees and Sadducees. We've heard a lot about that recently. People have kind of been jarred into the reality of, we've been acting like the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Well, that's because it's human nature and it repeats the same old patterns. It never gets more classy or less devious.
Yeah,
it gets more so.
The Apostle Paul talked about I was a Pharisee of Pharisees. He was the best of the best of the best.
Yeah.
And there is a pride that comes with that.
He spoke to it well.
Yeah, it's who you are. It's your identity almost.
It becomes that.
Yeah, and so that's a good point to bring up. That you know what that means right there? That means we need to get more coffee.
Yeah, that means the Yeti is too light.
But yeah, just the fact that Paul was in a way almost bragging after he was converted even. Hey, I was a Pharisee of Pharisees.
Well, he could enter right into it.
Yeah.
That's the thing, is he hadn't lost touch with where he had been, right?
Yeah.
He could easily relate back to, I was just like that.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's why it was so visceral to him, things like that. It's
so to recap, you go to Sunday morning meeting.
Yeah.
Do you have a Bible study on Wednesdays?
Wait, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's a mixed bunch of group?
Kind of both places. It's been a little bit of a mixed bunch there.
How has it changed, if at all?
How has it changed?
Yeah, in the last year.
Well, it has changed a lot. It has changed a lot. People have woken up to a lot of things, and come to a lot of revelation. And I guess the big difference to me is that, and this is neither here nor there maybe, but it's it is hard often to go to a gathering where you then hear people speak, especially once you've walked. I mean, none of us were quite in the conversion path of Saul, but it's
but you can still relate to a certain
we
extent.
can relate to that, exactly, and that really that's part of why it hits so hard, I think, for a lot of people to sit there and listen to someone, stand up and speak about how feeling bad for everyone around them that's for sure going to hell. And speaking of how privileged I am to be one of the chosen, when that is what exudes in the thought, it's troubling, and it contaminates fellowship for me. That's exactly what it does. And it's quite possible, entirely possible, because of the complexity of the human creature and the deviousness of that old reptilian human nature. It's absolutely possible that, and this thought has often occurred to me, that I am doing the same for others by being too free of this, and I don't mean that in a free. That's probably the wrong choice of words, but being too much in the other perspective of embracing too much those who they would consider rubbish and outside of salvation and hopeless. And it's not, and then obviously if you challenge it on those grounds, that's so extreme that then the act of hyperbole kind of comes into play. And then their response would be that, no, no one's beyond hope. But the point being that beyond hope means that they would have to be converted by one of us. And not be able to be reached by God himself. And some of the horror of all of these revelations to me, I think, is to realize, because I've had to explore this myself in depth. I think it's this kind of time we're in. But I've come to the realization that did I stand up at a convention because of family or friends or that type of thing? There's an element to that. I think there is for everyone. And if you say you didn't care, well, people love to say I don't care what other people think, but we're not. God didn't make us that way.
Yeah,
we're engineered as social creatures.
Yeah,
by his design, and he wants to be with us. So he cares what we think, right? He lets himself into our thoughts. And he knows the hairs on our head. So to say that we don't care what people think and that, it's almost akin to saying we can't be affected by what God thinks, because there's a similar relationship. And he's created us in his image. So
I remember very, very much when I professed.
Yeah.
Down to the details. I was 8. And I was one of the first ones out the door. I don't know, because people come in. Well, people come in like congratulate you or whatever. But I remember being one of the first ones out the door. I went and got cocoa, went to the bunks and set it on my bunk. Went and took a shower and then just went to bed. And I don't know what that means, but I remember being like, oh man, I get to speak. There's a special time for new professing people on Sunday morning, was it? I don't know. Probably.
It varied. It varied. There wasn't when I stood up. There was no such thing. I was happy about that.
Or maybe it was a baptism. I don't know. But anyways, I just remember. But there was a certain amount of pride that came with it, for sure.
Oh, sure.
And
could be.
It was pleasing. I was so young and well, I don't know. But there was
you
definitely
knew there was going to be earthly reward in it.
Yeah, for sure. So
that's why I say, we all knew. To a degree, if we're family involved like this, we know that that's a factor. To say it's not is just to simply not address the truth of it all.
Well, and that reminds me of I think it's Proverbs. I'm not sure. I should know it, but our righteousness is as filthy rags. So any of our best attempts of anything, there's affected by that human nature, like you said, and that's the
always
problem, isn't it?
Isn't
Right?
it?
That's the problem. That's what we need a solution for.
Yeah.
Thank God we have one.
Yeah, exactly. We would never have a hope otherwise.
Yeah.
Because it just returns like the filthy rags. The one thing about filthy rags is that they seem to multiply without any help. I was just actually cleaning up, even though it doesn't look like I cleaned up ever around here. But
should we pan over and let them see the entire shop?
You certainly are welcome to. If you think they would like to, they may need to go wash their eyes out.
No, this is better than what my shops looked like at some times. So,
well, there's it's one of those things. It's a nonstop parade of projects, and many of these are things that I started and probably will never finish. It's just like so much of our earthly life. But, there's, I guess the reason I was kind of touching on the professing thing and thinking about that a lot is I really had to come down to was that the reason I did it? Was that the reason I did it? And for me, I was 12 and I was scared to death.
You're a latecomer.
I was very, they had almost given up on me. No, I'm kidding. I think there was so for me looking back, for a year and a half-ish before I stood up at a convention, I was dreading standing up at convention. And I've experienced that sort of dread since. Somewhat in the last year, here and there, when there was things that God laid on my heart that I knew I needed to do, but I didn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe even this interview, if we're being fair. I think there's an element of that here. And that doesn't mean it's, I guess what I would say is that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And it does mean there's a requirement of me. That's the hard part, is that we would love to, and I watch that happen. I've done it myself. It's back to the whole Pharisee thing. We can relate to it, so it's gross. Because we do there's a popular stunt, which is to, I'm going to leave it in God's hands. When he's already laid something on me that I know I need to do. Mm-hmm. I don't want to do it. It's going to be hard. What do you do? Well, I'm letting, kind of shoving off the little we can do to be the least we can do, and shoving off the burden of resolution here on God when he has already laid a request at our feet. Mm-hmm. It simply can't rest. That has to, we reach a point where we're out of fellowship with God, because it's kind of like when we ask one of our children to do something and they disobey us, and there has to be a resolution in that. It can't be and that takes varying shapes, but it's like at the very least, you have to end up with a conversation of why didn't you obey me, and understand. And
if you want this video to go viral, you can give us the correct answer of how to raise our kids.
Correct answer is pray a lot and wing it.
Good advice.
This is my experience anyway. There's no manual, because it would only work for one kid, and then the next one would defy the manual. Yep. So yeah, and that's why I say human beings are very complex. The interesting thing is that the problems we fall into are extremely mundane, basic, boring, consistent. Take your pick. Like I said, reinventing the wheel. It's the same. There's nothing. Solomon that said there's nothing new under the sun?
Yep.
And I feel like he was observing that more than anything when he said that, because he had, as a rich and powerful man, he had such an ugly view of humanity. I think they have some of the worst, and with possibly deep memory banks and over-analytical brains being the second. But we'll leave that rabbit hole for a different time. But the perspective that he would have had on humanity showed him very, very starkly how the repetition of climbing out of the slough and falling back in. And yes, we have a very dire need for forgiveness.
All right, so we probably should get into a little bit of your childhood and how you were raised, and just kind of get a perspective, and then kind of how you've come. I mean, we touched bases on it a little bit, but how you've come the last couple of years with everything that's gone on, and revelations and things that have become public, and I've really enjoyed talking to you because I don't know, it's not that you're unfiltered, but you just speak it as it is.
Some people would accuse me of such.
And it's good, but let's go fill your coffee cup up, huh?
That sounds like a wonderful idea. That always helps.
Yeah, it's getting to be that time. Afternoon
Joe?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, I used to break iPads all the time, and then when I bought the 9.7, I think it is, the 9.7 Pro, nobody made a good case for it.
Do I need to lock this somehow?
Oh yeah, here, let me help you. It's easier to show you than, well, maybe not. I lied. There we go. Well, hop in, sir. And yeah, this is a mess too.
That's all right.
Turned the old family grocery getter into a temporary work truck while that one's waiting for the mechanic. So we have a little bit of. It's gonna scream at me, but it won't care about you. So if you,
Okay, well, I'll strip it.
if you're if you're inclined to violate law on YouTube,
There probably has been a time.
oh, that could be. I'm sure that's not the only time you can find out there, but.
So we're in Bozeman,
Belgrade.
Belgrade.
Yeah.
We're close, right?
Yeah, it's only about 10 miles. 10 miles away from Bozeman. It's kind of all becoming one town at this
Yeah.
stage.
Beautiful
Yeah.
country though up here.
It is really pretty. Yeah, you can definitely see why people flock here. It does.
We'll see how good of a driver you are and see if that stays up there or not. But
Oh, that's the goal here?
yeah.
It's like a game. Woo, came close to losing it already.
So you were born and raised, your parents born and raised?
Yeah.
How far back does it go?
Both,
Does it go back to the shores of Galilee?
not in our family lineage.
No.
On my dad's side, it went back to my great-grandparents. And then on and maybe even on great-great on one side of it.
Wow.
Yeah. And then on my mom's side, it went back to well, on her mom's side, it went back further, and I think to great grandparents, possibly there. Yes, because she had a great grandma who I remember actually who outlived all of her, like I think all of her children and 2 husbands, and she was professing. So yeah, it goes back a long ways on mom's side. But,
Yeah.
yeah. But then my grandpa on mom's side was the first one to profess in the family name. So.
And where were you born?
South Dakota.
You were in South Dakota. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was actually brought home as a baby to the place that you lived on
Okay.
briefly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quite a thing to make your acquaintance after all these years and come back to that common thread.
Yeah, it is interesting.
And I was very intrigued to see where he had been and what you'd done and kind of what your life's experience has been up to this point. That was there's a lot of it that I'm not surprised, honestly, but in terms of what you experienced and what brought you to the conclusions that they've come to.
Yeah.
It's interesting how it's there is no such thing as a linear journey.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Because for me, I would say that for me, the perspective of kind of I think God has been working on deconstructing my model of who's a Pharisee and who's not for probably about that's probably a poor expression of it, but by that I mean deconstructing for me the vision of because I've prayed for years to him that he would help me see others as he does. Thinking, unfortunately, a lot of these things we tend to pray with this notion that we already have a pretty good idea what that is, and that's it's a mistake. And, I can speak to that one honestly because it was a mistake that I think I've made frequently, in terms of just seeing things. It's almost like a cross-eyed view of what God sees, because it was like I saw things that he was trying to show me, but not really as they were.
We've got a train up there, so we're just waiting for the train, just in case anybody's wondering.
We didn't just park in the middle of the road.
So, so you're okay. So born and raised pretty deep in. I mean, it goes back quite a few generations. So,
and I think I would have to kind of come back to that to a certain degree and be like, there's been an element of this only in fellowship with us will you be saved ingrained in there, to be fair. And it was definitely present. I think God's been able to work a lot of that out in more recent times for many of at least very close family that I've been very close with for a lot of years. And that's encouraging to see.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially when it's something that I felt like I was going crazy.
Yeah, it's always good to have others on the same page that you can talk to, and I don't know if relate is the right word, but it is, I guess, because
it's definitely relatable.
Because it's the same thought processes that we've all had growing up, and we need to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. It's something that we have to do on a daily basis to understand what God's vision, like you said, if seeing people as God sees them.
Right.
So your name has become prominent in the last few weeks with your brother sharing his account of the Hermosa sail.
Yeah.
So you are the second oldest, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It's second of 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't, you can go into whatever details you want, but you've shared some things with me that I think that go back a lot farther than where his story picked up at.
Well,
and
he's
I think
7 years younger, so...
Okay.
Yeah.
So you were, 15, 16? How old were you? 20?
I was 21.
Okay.
Let me see. No, 20. Sorry.
Okay.
20 and actually living out here.
Oh, and Colton was 14.
When Dad finally lost the place, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Colton would have been...
14-ish.
13.
13.
Yep.
Okay. And so you were 21. Okay. So you have
20. Sorry, I misstated that. Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. But you had a more insight that goes back farther, which I thought was really interesting. To give you more context, I guess.
Some of that only came to my knowledge fairly recently too. I think the climate that we're in today, like I said about judgment earlier, there are things that we're tasked with discernment, and that is a very real responsibility that I feel quite heavily now, because it's been horribly maligned in terms of it's been relabeled as judgment all the time. Well,
discernment, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I recently
and discernment defined is perception without judgment.
Say that again?
Perception without judgment.
Okay.
So when you perceive something, someone's doing something wrong, it's not okay, whatever the case, we're not tasked to
condemn that person. We're not tasked to decide their eternal fate, which kind of goes back to just because they're not doing what we say or think they should be doing doesn't mean that's up to us to decide either. But in terms of the perception part, we can't miss that, because in large part we have missed that. If we have things that need to be perceived and understood, there are things that we are tasked to do and called on for. And if we perceive something, but then we say, "Oh, I can't judge.
Yeah.
Well, no, you can't judge, but you are tasked with perception, and that's a responsibility, and that should not be shunned.
Yeah, that's a good point. I recently had a conversation with a worker through text. I think I shared this with you on the phone. But I had just mentioned, I had mentioned another worker who was not a good person. I won't bring up his name, but he was not a good person.
Do you want me to? No, I'm kidding.
And I just mentioned,
I want to hang on to it for this turn.
On the text, I said, based on his, the things that were outwardly, his fruits, if you will, and my firsthand knowledge of seeing that, I said, I don't know that he was saved. I don't know that he is living a life of a truly converted person. Mm-hmm. And the response was, well, that's quite a judgment you're making, I would say. But that's exactly the...
Whoa! We got it. Wait, what do I get if I tip it over? No, I'm kidding.
That's the mentality, though, that
right.
that there is. Oh, you're just judging people.
And that's a mechanism that is often used to well, it's a convenient mechanism that the Antichrist uses to sweep things under the rug. That's exactly how it has worked. Well, I know what I'm getting. What would you like?
I'm going to get an
I got it.
iced vanilla latte.
Iced vanilla latte. All right. You don't want a 6-shooter?
Probably not. At what time is it? 4 o'clock? Probably not quite.
I've never seen that before. That's hilarious. Maybe you can only sell it to... Hi, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Good.
What are we drinking?
Sorry, one more time.
Iced vanilla latte.
Iced vanilla latte. What size?
What was that?
I need an iced vanilla latte.
Okay, what size?
16 ounce.
16 ounce.
16. Okay.
Is that big enough? Are you sure?
Mm-hmm.
2 shots.
2 shots or 4? Or...
3.
3.
2 shots. Okay. Anything else for you?
I'll do a shot in the dark decaf.
What the heck is that?
Right. Power coffee.
Okay.
Decaf in that.
So,
If
you know
you
how
could.
many shots is in it?
Just one.
Just one
Yeah.
shot?
1 shot and a cup of coffee, but all decaf. Can you do that?
Okay.
What's the point of getting
And that's a
coffee if
16
it's
ounce.
all decaf?
16.
Well,
So,
decaf still
instead
has a
the
third of the
standard 6
caffeine.
shots, you want an extra shot in there. So you want 3 shots?
Oh yeah, because you're doing an Americano style.
Yeah. Is
Yeah.
that black coffee?
Yeah. So just do an Americano 3 shots. That'd be perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Thank you. That
Yeah,
actually
sorry about
simplifies the order. Thank you for helping me.
Yeah, no, it's okay. All right, so just 3 shots.
Now I know what to ask for next time.
Got it. All right, and then 3 shots of the latte.
Yep.
Yeah. 3 shots on the 16 ounce.
Got it.
Yeah. This little stand is
the better?
Has one of the best in Belgrade.
Yeah.
And they're open until 6 p.m. And all the coffee shops around here typically tend to shut down about
Right
2
after lunch, yeah.
or whatever. And yeah, and quite honestly, these guys have knocked it out of the park for me so many times. This is the first time I've gotten a barista that hasn't heard of the lingo that I'm talking about. Usually
So
that can be a
normally
little
it's just
funny.
drip coffee with a espresso shot in it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in this instance, they don't do drip here, I think, and so they kind of just run the math, and they're like, all right, well, I usually do 2 shots in a 16 ounce, so we'll add a third shot.
That makes
and
sense.
We're done.
Yeah.
And then she just, made me realize what they are doing, what the math they are doing when I give them my order normally. I don't very often get coffee outside of home because I am quite spoiled. I have a little Chibo coffee maker at home. Awesome coffee it makes. It's so good. Yeah, so decaf, back to your point, or your your earlier point. Decaf has a third of the caffeine, so it's still got caffeine. Plenty enough that if I have too much of it, I like strong coffee, and so I'm after the flavor, not the buzz. I definitely don't need it. I do enjoy a cup of wake-up coffee in the morning, but after that, I pretty much drink decaf because I've got a high energy level, and it's not something I need to add caffeine to, and so I usually go to strong decaf, which is kind of like a half calf. But yeah, so going back to really appreciated some thoughts that became very real over this last summer that were, well, not this last summer, but the prior year here. Really examine what is expected of us. We're tasked with 3 things. You know, we're tasked with discernment, for one thing, and we're asked that we would. You know, we had at one point Wednesday night studies. We went through. Oh, it eludes me now. I believe it's maybe Hebrews. Going through Hebrews, and is it in Hebrews? No. It was one of Paul's writings, but not that one, I think. I would have to look back. Anyway, we're going through. There's we could look it up actually pretty easily. I just can't remember it now. But where those he's writing to, he's disappointed in them. That by now, I thought you would need meat, and yet you need milk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so we find that we love our kids when they're little and they're cute, but if they just stayed there, there's an interesting thing that something that Jordan Peterson spoke to. You know, you're familiar with him?
I'm not.
He's a clinical psychologist that sort of put his lectures on YouTube and then accidentally became famous.
Okay.
But a brilliant scholar that, like a few exceptions to the rule now, how he studied science. He basically studied himself right into believing in God, because when you study honestly and you're not looking at it through a filter, and you're not believing what you're told by other people who are not eyewitnesses and not actually testifying of real things, but just building hypotheticals, then that's where that path leads. You know, and he came to a point today. He started out, I think he would probably call himself borderline atheist, at the very least agnostic. Eventually became kind of a full agnostic perspective, and eventually, after years of just pure analysis, on a scientific basis, had to come to, after honestly applying the scientific process, had to come to the conclusion that there is absolutely a God, and I need to listen to it. And, you know, huge respect to that. It's not an easy journey, and it's one that is not popular.
Half the flavor vanilla and fat. And then did you want whipped cream on top?
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Anything else?
Add the dollar back in before.
Thank you.
Now you gotta do math.
That's why I only made it one, because I can't do math beyond one.
All right, thank you guys
Thank
so
you.
much.
You
Have
bet.
a blessed day.
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you. And did you catch that?
The price?
No, what she?
Have a blessed day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see, it's not as uncommon even
You know,
here as we would expect sometimes. That people, and that's one of those things that, unfortunately, if I'm going to sit here and view the world through the lens of exclusivity, I'm going to be like, she doesn't know what blessed is.
I talked. That was
horrible.
That was one of the first things that I realized after I left, was how close-minded I was on communication outside people, the friends and workers.
Right.
And like, so then you go to the store and you're like, people are striking up a conversation about what they learned at their Bible study and whatever.
Yeah.
And it was just like, it was just amazing to have my eyes opened that the church isn't a denomination. The church isn't a certain culture. The church is in the believers, you know? And it was just amazing. Like, you just have an appreciation for people in general because you aren't narrow-minded anymore. Yeah.
You can find them
and
anywhere.
you can have fellowship with, yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, God needed to get a little rougher with me. Call it stupid, stubborn, yeah, all of the above. I'm very, well, let's just say I have a lot of respect for him every time he's able to get anything through to me. Because I understand that can be difficult, and is difficult. Let's see, where shall we head off to? Do you want to go? Maybe we should top this thing off, actually, before we go too far. Because I would like to run out to... It's so stupidly smoky. It's maybe more fun to go see a river or something, because sorry about that.
It's okay,
again.
I can hold it.
Is it okay?
It's fine. It's got a case.
It's made to be pretty tough.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it's. She almost asked about my microphone. She really wanted to know.
I know. She was wondering
and then
what was
she got
going
distracted, so I didn't have to tell her.
on. Yeah.
But anyway, that's too long of a story to start right now before I fuel up. So
Okay.
I'll go. I'm actually gonna pop this off if I
Go
can
ahead.
and run in there because this is a co-op and I have an account. And,
Oh, nice.
And then we get money back at the end of the year on fuel and everything. And that's kind of awesome.
You were talking about some things that you'd learned over the last year or so. God has taught you. Mm-hmm. And then the camera fell over.
Yeah, oh, that's right.
And so I think you were talking about discernment, and you were talking about
Growing.
Yep.
Growing in spirit. There's an expectation of spiritual growth, and that we would not stagnate
Yeah.
or remain babies. You can take the analogy of childlike. That needs to remain in the demeanor, in the spirit, but
And by that, really, it
childish
means that you're
needs to
willing.
go.
You're willing to learn. You're willing to grow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I was telling you before the camera fell over. That's right. I remember now. Jordan Peterson. We're speaking of one of the things that he said, and it was in. I don't remember who he related it back to. It was someone else said it, and he repeated it. I believe.
Okay.
But he said that it was a study. Sorry. So it was a study that he referred to, which he does a lot, and I could be misquoting that. I don't know, but anyway, we'll roll with that as an expectation. That it was anyway. The fact that stood out to me was that we, as parents always speak to their children at a level just beyond what they currently comprehend, and it's just an innate thing that we automatically do this.
This has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I got to throw this in there.
Do it.
I'm a little bit embarrassed to say this, but maybe it'll help somebody out there. This was a few years ago, but I told my son, I said, stop being so childish.
How old was he?
A child.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Did he look
I don't
at
know.
you funny?
No, I don't think so.
No?
Thankfully,
He just had the grace to let it go?
yeah, but there is a certain point where you gotta remember their children, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Anyways.
We all start at some point there. And, yeah.
But yeah, so you talk to your kids a little bit above their comprehension.
Yeah, and that's referred to in other ways in the scripture. When I was a child, I did the things of a child, and then I put childish things behind me, and so on. We are expected to grow, which is, and it's not a commandment in the form of don't commit murder or adultery or etc. But it's something that any loving parent wants for their child. And it's not hard to equate that to natural parenthood. A third thing that goes along with that's very real to the fabric of where we stand today, and that's the false there will be false prophets among you. Jesus said that. We can't ignore that. He warned us because he knew it would happen. There are many ways, and I am in that myself, that I want to not believe some of the things. Sometimes people want to not believe the evil that's come out. Well, it was foretold. It was warned, and we can find all kinds of ways to soften it, to try to make it an easier pill to swallow because it's pretty bitter.
So, I've been gone. I didn't leave because of CSA stuff.
Right.
I've been gone probably about 12 years now. Help me, explain to me, or just how did you feel when you heard that originally? When the floodgates started to open, where were you? Like, how did you find out?
Well, that's a varied question, I think, because like I've said to you before and earlier, outside of this conversation, that there was a lot of, in spite of maybe the kind of the exclusive mindset, there wasn't a whole lot of blinders on in the families that I grew up. Well, no, I take that back. On mom's side, there definitely was, but on dad's side, the family, my grandpa and grandma, for instance, like they knew about different things going on. They actually knew about Ira Hobbs and issues there. They knew they lived.
He was one of the first ones that I heard about while still going to meetings. And
and I knew about him when I was probably like 8 years old.
Looking back at it, like I just dismissed it. Like there was like,
well, we were kind of encouraged to.
Yeah, it's just like, well, he has issues, but we gotta,
And to be fair, society as a whole had quite a learning curve around this stuff.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing that I'm seeing when that context is brought up as a defense is that society as a whole is learning. We don't seem to be as a fellowship. So
basically,
there's a big separation to that point.
Yeah. So what you were saying is this wasn't necessarily a bombshell to you when Dean Brewer came out and then a lot of this stuff.
No,
it was
just not. I always knew a certain amount of what was wrong, and how bad I thought it was. It was in no way, shape, or form prepared me for what lay ahead, because I shouldn't say that. It prepared me more than many. I feel really bad for people who had their entire trust shattered in March of 23, because to add, it was hard enough for me, and I didn't have that naivety before that. And because, to me, it had always, it was that I knew, I think the simplest way to put it is I always knew there was something amiss. I just didn't know how deep and dark it went.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good...
And I think I've been extremely surprised.
I think that's a good point, though, because we all probably heard some story of something, right?
Exactly.
But we just didn't know how deep and how widespread it is. And I don't even think we have any clue on how widespread it really is, even now.
Even now. There's lots of that we may never know.
Yeah.
And so I don't, and I'm not equating I mean, the CSA and SA issues, I'm not necessarily equating that apples to apples with false prophetry, if that makes sense. That's a symptom.
Mm-hmm.
That's a symptom of...
It's a result of false doctrine.
It absolutely is,
Yeah.
yes. It's not... That is a symptom. It's not the root. It's not the problem. It's just simply one of the branches. And it's a nasty, thorny one. And I'm not saying this to discredit it in any way, shape, or form. It's horrifying.
Well, it's like what Chester said. This is the fruit that is being produced.
Exactly. And that's what Jesus said, is that you will know them by their fruits. So when we take those two statements that Jesus made about there will be false prophets, you will know them by their fruits. So for many, that's kind of a harsh conclusion, and I can understand how they have a hard time with it, and in ways I have too. We don't have any other warning. That's the hard part to even swallow it, to play the other side of that and look at what Jesus said. We don't have any warning. We don't have any other way to identify. We don't have any other symptom to see but the fruit. If the fruit is rotten, then that's false.
Yeah.
And I think, and so to speak to the other side of that conversation, where so many people are struggling so mightily with the reality of these revelations, of the things that God has laid bare. And I know there's even people still claiming it's humans just talking, which is the problem. But God's. I'm going too slow for this bug. They're going to pass me. Too much country driving here. It's hard for them to just come to the conclusion that God is revealing this, but there's so much proof to that. So much proof in that there are things. So let's just go to Dean Brewer's situation. We can be pretty... there's lots of other arguments to the contrary, but it is such a miracle that worker sat down with those three women. Was it three at the time? No, I'm sorry, it was just two, wasn't it? With Dean Brewer's laptop and talked about it. Like, just let that sink in. Think about that without any filter on it, without any presumption on it, without any prejudice on it. But there was two ladies, I believe, maybe three, that he sat down with and discussed this laptop situation. Had that conversation not happened, we would be in an entirely different place today.
Yeah.
God can move hearts to do things, as we've been shown abundantly, far outside of what we may presume he can. The reality is he doesn't even need us to do his will.
Yeah,
he's
not
us.
Exactly. He chooses to use us, right?
But the likelihood of that happening ever, that conversation happening ever, it has historically not happened ever, and it would not be likely to happen now. It would not be likely to happen 10 years ago. And God made that happen.
Yeah.
And, there's maybe a worker sitting there saying he's made a mistake today. I don't agree with that at all. God knew. He knew about all of this all along. And he let it go as long as there was a benefit he could use. When it reaches a point where he's done letting something run its course, he will change its direction. And we're fools to stand in his way. We will only get left behind and possibly run over. And with or without us, His purpose carries forward. So,
Amen. Yeah, we were talking, and I just about said this earlier, I think, when we were in the shop. If we say no to God, that's not going to change God's will.
No, he's not going to reconsider.
If you're not willing for it, he'll find somebody else who is. And depending on what it is. I mean, obviously, if we're called to do something, we need to do it, but God's will be done, regardless of us.
In spite of us.
In spite of, yes, that's the right word.
And regardless of us, yes, also. But yeah, it's not something that, I mean, I even look at Paul. What a remarkable testimony. I've visited a lot about him. So he wrote so much of the New Testament. What would have happened if Paul had been struck with the bright light, fallen down, and screamed curses at God instead? Refused to hear him.
Some people would argue that Saul didn't have a choice.
That can't be true.
Yeah.
That simply can't be true, because God has never... I mean, that was a violent action, and that's part of what I started into. I've lived a certain amount of that myself. Like I said, he's got to be a little rougher with me than he was with you. And that's okay. It's not that I don't deserve it. And not that I don't require it, I should say. We all deserve worse, but it's in terms of the requirement, he's not unjust. I fell into the trap of alcoholism, and through that learned it's a cycle that, even to talk to seasoned alcoholics who have helped hundreds of people to sobriety today, many of them examined my path to and through alcoholism and recovery and everything, and they've said that doesn't make any sense. Like, never heard of it happening like that. And for one thing, it was a short, vicious cycle. Tons of liquor, meaning way more dosage than the body is made to handle, which shortens the whole adventure from start to finish. So call it adventure like it's something pleasant, but anyway, start to finish, from the time I started drinking regularly and not having like months of time between where I would drink. But from the time I started daily drinking to the recovery was almost exactly at 3 years. And no matter how violent and nasty it is, usually people go on longer than that.
Yeah.
And usually people don't respond to treatment the way I did either. One of the things that happened is I went to AA. There wasn't much help for me there, and there was a real crisis of faith that happened, because then you come to these people and they're all like, well, you just haven't found Jesus yet. It's like, well, then who have I been talking to? Who you haven't found God? Well, okay, that creates a whole different crisis, and you're already in the middle of a very fragile mental and emotional state. So that's highly discouraging. And after, on the heels of that, I went through a severely suicidal state, which is kind of another walk on the dark side that people don't like to talk about. But it's a very real reality. You know, I can literally sit here and tell you honestly today that I can understand and empathize with someone who has gotten to a point where they see that as the solution, like it is better than any other option. It's a horrifying place to be, but you can get there. Our minds are capable of it. And to judge someone harshly for having gotten there is not okay. And I did that before I became that. And then that's how I learned not to do that.
Well, and not to change the subject, but I think that's a very good point what you made. You don't know until you know, right? So a lot of, before I left, before people leave meetings, or come. Maybe they still go, to an outlaw meeting or whatever you want to say, but
I need to speak to you more on that. Remind me.
Okay. You don't know until. So from the outside or from the inside looking out, you're always going to have this judgmental side of it until you see the actual truth, the gospel, the simplicity of the gospel, and how that isn't affected by outward performance.
Right.
But so when you're on the outside, then you can relate to people on the inside, but the people on the inside can't relate to the people on the outside yet, unless God reveals it to them.
Exactly.
So it's the same thing what you were saying with that is until you've gone through it, you just can't relate and you're so judgmental about it. And I think that's how
there's huge stigma around a lot of these things, just human issues. And we've been years behind the curve in adjusting for that.
Sure.
Not unlike the Amish families you've talked to.
So we're going to go hike this mountain, right?
Yeah, I was thinking we can hike up it as far as you want to go, but it's a beautiful walk across this meadow, and we get to a little creek there.
Okay.
And we can we can't wander too far because it's on private property, I believe, but
we'll go take a look, though.
Beautiful place to just go hang out.
Awesome.
And we can go as far up the mountain as we feel like we got the time and energy for today.
I've only got a shot and a half down, so let me get another swig.
Yeah, another swig. Do you want to take it
and
with
you're
you?
No.
Okay.
You're decaffeinated, so.
So I'm still running on Morning Joe, technically.
What a view. It is smoky, though.
Oh, it is. That's why I thought it'd be nice to come to a place where we can see things close up instead of far away.
Yeah.
And we can not stare at the smoke screen. Yeah, Oregon is setting records for wildfires.
Is that where a lot of it's coming from?
Mm-hmm. I think that's primarily the origin of it. There's some up by Helena and stuff too, though.
Yeah.
Middle of Montana. Yeah. So in terms of that experience through the alcohol addiction phases of things, that I learned to. I met people who had walked on a very rough side of life. I mean, some of these people had been born into, they were second or third generation alcoholic, none of which had received any help to become any less addicted. So it was actually amplifying as it went along, kind of like a lot of these things do. And then they would start drinking as the generations progress. They drink younger and younger because the parents are less and less there. I guess the big thing that stood out to me is that however they came to know him, even through AA, all of these people would credit God with their sobriety and for saving them. For saving them from a horrible, torturous death or suicide. And
so, if you
why?
don't mind me asking, how long ago was this?
2010.
Okay.
Yeah, 2010, I believe.
Okay. So you're full. I'll let you get back to your story, but you were fully going to meetings. You were able to, or were you not?
Well, I mean, there was times when I was too drunk or unwell in other ways to go, but as much as was possible,
okay,
I went. Yeah. I never go ahead. I never missed. Never missed when I was able.
And was it a secret then? I mean,
for a time.
Okay.
Yeah, for a time. It's actually the one of the biggest turning points for me was I had been in the hospital strapped to a bed because I had been blacked out and threatening to end it again. And I was sobering up or coming to basically the next morning and being released, and bumped into little grandma and grandpa that we had gone to meeting with.
Okay.
They were in there getting some blood work done. And she just came up to me and, well, how are you doing? Well, I am just a mess. You know, I've got yesterday's clothes on. I'm all disheveled and clearly something, you know, everything isn't right.
Yeah.
I think I was even wearing slippers or something. And so that was the moment for me where I was just like, you know, the horrible thing about addiction, which I've spoken to recently, is whenever that's part of how I can relate so completely to this lust for power, that this is an unpopular thing to say in many circles, in many places, but there's a desire for control that kind of is one of the main driving points that we are in battle with today.
You're referring to some of the overseers and workers.
Correct. Yeah. And just to me, I don't pretend to have that all figured out, but in terms of there's one thing I feel like there's one way I can sum it up definitively. Whenever we've had an issue that needs to be brought before the church, as per Matthew 18, nobody can seem to figure out who that is.
Who to bring it up to?
Correct. Or who the church is, rather. Mm-hmm. Because the workers are accustomed to handling everything, or sweeping everything under the rug, which is what has been the case in some areas. Mm-hmm. And the elders effectively are hosts of gatherings. They really haven't had any major interest in the goings on. I mean, to the degree that we're aware of. And here's the greater.
They don't have the authority that an elder should have. Is that what you're saying?
I would argue that for sure. In most ways, that's, I think, absolutely true.
Yeah.
And then in many areas, it's been all kind of systemically selected. I mean, that you go, if the workers are all selecting elders among themselves behind closed doors, number one of the major requirements for an elder is, and you could argue this, and many do, but it's very clearly called out as the husband of one wife, and his children are mentioned. So that does seem to point to marriage with children. Mm-hmm. And in light of what you could easily make the argument that, well, that's not a rule. That has to be that. But in light of what we've had to discover over the last year, wouldn't that have maybe helped?
Yeah.
To have people in the decision-making process
that have more life experience.
That have an understanding of being a father and a husband.
Well, not only just that, but like marriage experience.
Right.
Just regular struggles that people face.
Right.
You know, the workers are homeless, penniless, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Ministry. Well, we'll maybe get to some more of that, but on the outside, it just doesn't add up to being able to relate to the friends. So,
well, again, Jesus said, bring it before the church. That's a commandment from our Savior. Don't you think we should, if we can't figure out who the church is, and if the lowly, the smallest, lowliest, least, newest professing, hardest to hear among us doesn't have any recourse in the instance that someone is abusing them and not being held accountable, isn't that a prime case for why we would have things brought before the church? Because that's already an indicator of a hierarchical structure that someone has a political power. When someone has a political power, and not everyone, but most, will fall into the same old human pattern of abusing it. Which is why we're not drawn to a group, a building, a structure. We're drawn to God.
yeah,
Because
amen.
God is never unfair.
This is beautiful.
Isn't it?
Look at the view.
You missed most of the wildflowers. This was, you can see all the husks of
Oh yeah.
everything here, but this is just, when this is green in the spring, it's just awash with color out here.
Yeah.
There's so many incredible little specimens.
It's pretty dry, like in South Dakota. It's drying up.
Yeah, it is here too. When you hit 90 for this many weeks here, it starts getting crunchy
Yeah.
quick. South Dakota, it's 110, right? But
Well, we had a few. Yeah, we had a few days over 100 for sure.
did you? Yeah.
This
It's
last
never
week.
too much more than here, but it's always like 5 to 8 degrees hotter, it seems like.
Okay, so we like to go down rabbit holes,
Oh boy.
but well, we just did, because what you
Clearly.
said was people in AA credit Jesus for delivering them from alcoholism and saving them. So you were kind of going somewhere with that, and then I interjected something.
Well, oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, that's kind of just, why, I guess, was the thought in my mind. Because I was still in that.
So you thought that was
Mindset.
like self-righteous for them to say that, or what?
Well, I just felt like they were misled. That's kind of what we would be conditioned to believe, is that, well, they just think they're saved by Jesus because he hasn't really ever been here.
Okay.
And then the realization of the fruits. Some of these people were still very rough.
Sure.
But it was very clear to me over the years, as I got to know some of them, that their gratitude, the way they felt toward God for delivering them of this one issue in their life. And it was to a point where they would be, committing their entire, like every waking hour that they could spare, even if they were broke, they would commit that to helping others in the same way. And it's kind of
What you just
kind of a
said is
cycle
very
that keeps on
profound.
going. What's that?
You help others. The works that you do are a result of thankfulness from the work that Christ did.
Exactly.
And so you could see that in others.
Right.
And so that was,
And I saw that in that. The big caveat to that is that I saw that in others that I didn't go to Sunday morning meeting with. So that's
that
what
was
kind of
God
started
opening
to
your
crack
eyes.
open the
Yeah.
big hard shell there for me. It was like I was like, wait, why would he say these people? You know, they're not even going to mating. You know, that's terrible. But it was kind of,
No, you're right.
it was kind of in there. And so then that has been a lengthy process. But at this point, when it's like I've probably mentioned to you at this point, but when anyone inserts themselves between us and God, it violates his word. It violates the sanctity of fellowship. It violates the promise that Jesus has made. I've been so comforted by Jesus' words that he'll be with us until the end of the world. That's powerful. And some days that's our only comfort, but it's a huge one.
So that was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And God started working on you back then.
Well, he just took him that long to work out one bug. So, there probably won't be too many more opportunities for him dead, but it was one that needed to go.
I love these. These are granite, right?
Most of this is actually volcanic rock.
Okay.
There is a lot of sedimentary here. There would be, I'm sure it's a strain of granite, if you will. I don't know.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of volcanic rock from the caldera the last time it went kablooey. And actually I should find you one. We'll stumble across one if nobody's pilfered them all. But there are all over in this part of the country, what we refer to as Montana moon pies.
Okay.
And they are very clearly giant droplets of rapidly cooled lava.
Cool.
That would have landed here when that went boom. Oh,
is this the creek?
It was the creek. I can still hear the other one. There's two. So, yeah.
This one's a little dry.
This one has become parched. Has become parched like the rest of this land. Okay, where is... Down in the bottom of this, we're bound to find one. I'd like to find an obvious one, though, so you can see what I'm talking about. Because they're pretty fun. And they're very, very symmetrical. I may have to venture slightly downstream. It's hard to say. It may not have landed as conveniently up here as it did down in the valley. That might be why they're more scarce too. But I am not seeing anything here right now.
I told Nolan that he has 10 hours worth of... I have 10 hours worth of memory card in the camera. So I think he's taken advantage of all 10 hours.
Yeah, not seeing anything, David, but I'll find you one before you leave.
No problem.
We'll figure it out.
All right,
Or
so
I'll show you a picture.
we got to keep walking to go to the next creek?
Yeah, we should.
Okay.
That's where the water's at now.
We walked up this far. We might as well see some water, huh?
Yeah, the next creek is actually very close. Yeah, I would guess that with all the timber that was probably here, it may have kind of shielded the terrain from that, or people have just picked them all for souvenirs. That's also possible.
Yep.
It's kind of funny because you'll find them like in every load of gravel that you get from a gravel pit. But on a popular...
There's a few wildflowers still.
Yeah. I forget
That
what...
one's
Oh, those are bee balm, aren't they? I think... No, maybe not.
I think bee balm's bigger.
Is it bigger?
They're purple though.
Yeah. Pretty little rascals.
Okay, let's see. get back on some subject, huh?
Right? Might as well. I guess what were we talking about last here?
Well, we were talking about AA and how
yeah, that type
God
of-
started to work in you there.
Yeah. Oh, so that was I had so one of the things about that is I do that a lot. Distract myself when I'm talking about one train of thought and derail it with another.
When you were picking rocks, I told the viewers that I told you had 10 hours and you're taking advantage of it.
I'm gonna milk that for all it's worth. Oh, that's funny. No, we better not. That would be a editing nightmare for you, wouldn't it? So I guess back to the thought of when you fall into addiction, at least this is my experience, seems to be pretty common among any who have been addicted for any reason or to anything. And that's because that is it's talked about in the Bible. I didn't really realize. Here we are. Here's the little guy that never dries up.
It's beautiful.
Yep.
There's something about a mountain stream.
Isn't it? And the taste is always right too. It's just nothing better. As long as it's upstream from the herd. Yeah, so like personally speaking, I don't like lying. Never have. And I've always tried not to. And even when it's embarrassing to recant something that turned out to be false, it's like, I'd rather do that than try to hold to a lie. And learn some hard lessons as a kid that way. I was taught well that lying isn't okay. So that's not ever been a question to me. And yet, once I became addicted to alcohol, it owned me completely. I would lie and manipulate for alcohol, and somehow I became okay with that. And it was because like I said, we don't have addiction spelled out in the Bible, but we have idolatry. And idolatry is when you worship something so much that you will compromise your principles for it. You will compromise what God has commanded and has shown you clearly to be right and wrong. You'll blur that line because it's in service of this new God. And power is very much the same way. That's one of the things that I've often wondered. How do you reconcile lying and slandering people? And, if you're addicted to power, you'll do anything to defend it. And it wasn't until I was sober and free of alcohol that I could look back and realize what a lying monster I had been with that. There was a lot of repentance necessary, and there was a lot of as with any, that's one of the interesting things to me is that just in AA, which I didn't actually follow the AA treatment protocol because I found help in private rehab instead. So I kept trying until I found things that made sense for me, which is what everybody who's stuck in addiction or idolatry has to do. If they can find a way to pick this onion apart, God's there to help you, but he's not going to do it for you. And that's one thing I had to learn as well, is that you can become angry with him and blame him for where you've put yourself. But, Satan helped you get there, yes, but your actions, your choices, your compromises, and your idolatry is what got you there today. And if you don't do everything you can do, then you'll die there. That's where we all die. So it's we have to come back to God, and He still wants to be first, but we have to kill the false god. We have to destroy it. We have to tear down the high places. That's why alcoholics that will tell you, doesn't matter how many years sober they've been, they will tell you today that, yeah, I've never touched it again. Why would you? You've torn down the high place. It doesn't need to be there anymore.
I feel like this is a metaphor for something.
What? Oh,
I feel like this is a metaphor coming up.
Well,
here, let's step back just a hair. I don't know if the water is loud or not, but
drowning out,
just in case,
overpowering the microphones.
These are pretty good, but just in case.
I stumbled over a rock there. I thought it'd make a great video if I fell in the creek. Walk back.
I would trust me. I would have made sure that was on there.
Yeah, you'd be like, no, we can't edit that. It's I locked that footage in somehow. Yeah. So, well, metaphorically speaking, I don't know that there's really a metaphor. It's just it's just life. When you idolize how you do things instead of why you do things, and not that you should idolize why you do things. What I'm saying is when you create a model of a form, that can become an idol, and it has. It does.
And you're referring to the logistics of meeting,
right?
And the we do this because we've always done this kind of thing.
Well, that's one aspect of it, but I think the greater thing of where we stand today is that there's not even, for some of these things, there's if the conversation is honestly had, we start to realize there's things we need to correct. But if we find some discomfort in that correction, which is crazy, there's always discomfort in correction. We had spankings as a kid. There's discomfort there. That's very normal with correction. Sometimes there's a lot of adjustment, but God expects us to grow. He does not expect us to remain stagnant. Yeah. And in another place, he refers to that as the lukewarm. So if we never grow, we just kind of stagnate, become lukewarm. But the thought of it's kind of back to why I said what I said about why do we have fellowship? Am I doing it to be, if it's something that I'm going somewhere, I'm listening to someone say a lot of things that I'm just not okay with, not in agreement with, but I keep going back and doing that over and over again to show some support or something like that, and then eventually you find out that the conversation is completely one-sided anyway. That's usually how that goes. And for that to be then broken down a little further, it's like it's pointless, because why are you doing it? Why am I doing it? More importantly, it's to be seen of men at that point. If I don't agree with how do you phrase that? If we can't enter into the truth of Jesus together, it's not fellowship, it's a fraud. And if I can't do that with certain people, but I can here, well then that's God telling me a change needs to be made. I don't pass judgment on anyone here, pass judgment on anyone there. It's simply, there can't be this stigma of, well, you have to do that or you're hard-hearted. You're kind of defeating the purpose of fellowship if you're going and trying to have fellowship with people who you are very concerned with where they're headed, and what they're saying and how they're taking these things out of context and applying them to, I'm generalizing a lot here. I get that, and we'll probably cut most of this out. But it's like if I don't find edification, let me simplify it better, because if I don't find edification, then why am I there? And we argue that point with ourselves of, well, if you're not there, it's just something wrong with you. Well, God has drawn a lot of people away from others, off by themselves, closer to Him, and we can't have a judgment on that, be judgy about that, because I have often, and I've shared this with quite a few people that I've spoken with, that if we picture John the Baptist, everyone of the formal religious community thought he was a crazy man in the wilderness. He's eating bugs. He's wearing a camel hair loincloth, which that seemed kind of a distinct garment, pretty specific. And he was, more importantly, he was off in the wilderness. He was not in any. That's where God needed him to prepare him for the journey. And no one could sit and judge that and say that he wasn't led of God. We know for a fact that he was absolutely led of God. He was used by God 100%
from the beginning.
From the beginning. Well, I shouldn't say 100% because he was human too, right? But it's at the same time, he was doing the will of his Father. But people would have had an opinion about what that looked like and would have thought that he should be doing what we're doing here. And that's a mistake. A mistake that I don't want to make anymore.
So what I'm hearing you say in more words than this, but is that the foundation, the exclusivity of meetings, that this is the only true way. And now, I will add that some people will say, no, there's, you can get to heaven not going to meetings. But they say that pretty loosely. Maybe some tribe in Africa that's never heard the gospel or something, that God would have mercy on them and whatever.
Only if there was no other option, sort of mentality. Yeah,
but
I get that.
In the general consensus, people, for the Friends and Workers, believe that you have to go to meetings to have a chance to be saved. There's no assurance of that.
Right.
But if you're going to be saved, you have to be So what you're saying is that we need to cut that mentality of the exclusiveness of meetings and realize that God is much bigger than that, and that He's working in the lives of people everywhere. He's working in the lives of Muslims. He's working in the lives of tribes in Africa. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And to come to that realization that God is so much bigger, He's outside of time and space, and to put Him into one fellowship that is supposedly the way is not the correct way of thinking.
Well, back to the idolatry thing. If you call something other than Jesus the way, my question for myself is, how did I not understand how dangerous that was? But we are all on a journey, and you can't beat yourself up for the past, but it's kind of like so many other things. It's kind of like alcohol. I don't understand how dangerous that was. I didn't. I understand, and it wasn't, I should rephrase that, because I just kind of felt like I was invincible in that, like many alcoholics do. And I think we're all capable and easily guilty of that exact that exact mindset, and it comes in with this mentality of taking the words of Jesus and applying them to our fellowship, and
that is the nail on the head. I feel a little bit like I'm a foot below you on ground, normal level, and now I'm like 2 feet.
Here, I'll step down here.
But that's right. John 14:6, Jesus says, I am the way,
Correct.
the truth, and the life.
There's two of them in there that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so they've hijacked the term to, as you alluded earlier, the Antichrist or false prophets, where they appear to be right.
Right.
Everything that meeting does appears to be right. So you can bump into somebody in Walmart and say, hey, we meet just like the first century church did. You know, we have a homeless ministry. We meet in homes. If they press you for what it's called, well, you'd say the truth. And on the surface, it sounds right. It looks right.
Yeah, if you don't
But
ever. One of the biggest problems right there is just that you've created the need. Well, you've created you set the stage for a striving of an appearance of perfection, which then, if we're striving for an appearance of perfection, well, now we've got this, and that's the standard the workers have been held to for years. And so that's how the cover-ups happen, is because, well, we can't let on that this happened because people realize it's not perfect. It seems like a chink in the armor. You know, there's a whole thought process that goes into that. And
See, this guy has it figured out.
no, not even close. So yeah, we have to dispose of that. Honest fellowship is what I love and enjoy. Pretentious fellowship, I can't do it anymore. And if I find it to be pretentious where I'm at, I will move. It's as simple as that. Because, and it's not that I'm judging anyone. It's just that I can't be comfortable with that anymore. There are things that it's just kind of, well, people aren't going to like this analogy at all, but it's like I don't often hang out with people who are drinking. I never was a partier or, went drinking in bars, things like that. I was a closet drinker. But it's a well-known phenomenon across the alcoholic community, is that alcoholics are most annoyed by drunks once they're sober. Like they just can't handle it. It's something they recognize. It hits home. It stings.
Well, you know why that is, right? It's
because we've learned our lesson.
You've learned your lesson, but
and it's hard to watch others learning theirs.
On a spiritual side, you're a new creation, right? So you're on the spiritual side, you're a new creation.
Right.
Okay. So at that point, you have completely new desires. You have completely
very much
new.
what Paul spoke to, that we're born into
Exactly.
a new, and to follow, to not born into the same old, but yeah, and that's what's probably the hardest about things today is having conversations with people we love and finding that there's this resistance to acceptance of what God is trying to teach us. It's not. There's nothing safer than following God. There's nothing more dangerous than following man.
Amen. Maybe more so for me saying this than you, because you kind of still go to meeting. I don't know, but it's the same for both of us. We love everybody who still goes to meeting. We love everybody who is still deceived, for lack of a better word, one way or another, doctrinally or otherwise. We have nothing against them as people. This is a spiritual battle. This is a spiritual warfare. It's
Absolutely.
It's not against. So anybody who's watching this that is still entrenched or still goes to meeting, and we love you. I mean, it's not about that. It's about, like you said, it's about the devil disguised as light. And I often tell people the truth is 90%. The greatest lie is 99% true.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of things that the friends and workers do that are absolutely fine.
Right.
But
clean living is a wonderful thing.
Absolutely.
And
I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for how I was raised. I often say
absolutely. Yeah. And just being cautious of where we put ourselves. That's wisdom. Absolutely. And I can vouch for that in more ways than one. But it's
But when you get to the point where your
Yeah.
living is your righteousness,
right.
that's where it's
That
not
gets
okay.
muddy real fast because then suddenly we're trying to take on ourselves.
And we're trying to clean up the
Yeah.
mud with our filthy rags.
Exactly. Yeah, which can't be done. Yeah, more to the. I think it's funny that you immediately took to calling them. Wait, was that you or me that took to calling them rebel meetings right away?
Well, outlaw. I've heard you
meetings,
say
something like
outlaw
that.
meetings
Did
or
I say that? Okay. I
non-sanctioned.
don't want to steal the credit if you. Said
No, it wasn't me. I think it was you.
Anyway, yeah. So, not to put too fine a point on it, but and make people uncomfortable, but there's there's people that I attend one meeting with, who in their other meeting they're in the rebel meeting,
Okay.
and yeah, there's that's part of what makes this still sweet fellowship for me, is that there are people who there are people who don't. Well, let's just go back to saying the same thing, but are you meaning this or are you meaning this? Now I mean this.
So, for
Realize
example,
many others mean this.
For
And
example,
that's
you
suddenly where I have to start drawing back, because I'm not comfortable with that anymore. And so when we can meet together and we're saying the same thing and we're meaning the same thing and we're focusing on the same one, that's sweet fellowship.
I think it's pretty awesome that there is people who have stood their foot and said, hey, all of this CSA, SA stuff that has gone on for way too long that we're just now coming to know about, to the scope that we know about it. I think when they stand up and say this isn't okay, but you can still have fellowship as an unsanctioned meeting or whatever you want to call it.
Right.
I think that's a really cool thing, as long as the foundation on Christ is correct, right?
Well,
So-
absolutely. Because when you think about any fellowship gathering in Jesus' name out there, what makes it right or what makes it wrong?
Yep.
Is it a political organization making money? Well, that's pretty wrong. Jesus whipped the money changers and overturned their tables. And we kind of see how he felt about that. So the fact that we have these shadowy funds, there's been talks, I've heard it expressed many different ways. There's often, well, that's none of my business, or gratitude for that being there, whatever the case, it shouldn't be there. That's,
Okay. You and I have talked a little bit about this, but this is the first time you've brought this up in the interview.
You didn't know I was going to do that, did you?
Shadowy funds. So we need some more details.
Well, when we don't have transparency of anything financially, that
And by that we mean the
Money.
Friends and Workers religion, we'll call it, is not a nonprofit. They're not set up in any sort of financial institution.
there's no accountability. And we bank on that one verse that says, let your right hand, sorry, I'm going to misquote it terribly. What is
That's
that?
okay.
Let not your right hand, your left hand know what your right hand doeth, right?
Yep.
Okay, left hand first. There we go. I knew that because us lefties always get left out in the cold. We are the messed up exceptions to the rule. So the when we look at even other fellowship gatherings, there's no and there's no body of people who are having fellowship together who are touting, here's what I gave, who are garnering the favor of God in that. That's unacceptable. We can agree on that. That's easy. That's kind of a hyperbolic point.
Yeah, you shouldn't brag about what you've given.
Right.
Yeah. Yep.
And we shouldn't compare.
Yep.
And all of that.
Well, Jesus talked about that, right? He said, you know, this widow lady gave all that she had, and it was nothing. It was pocket change to everybody else.
It was tiny to everybody else,
but that's
significant because it was all that she had.
And so he gives us a little bit of an insight on what's important when we're giving. Is that it's
found a rock under my heel, no harm.
Is the heart of the giving.
Yeah.
So yeah, we can agree that there's a lot of churches out there that the Friends and Workers would say are just horrible churches because it's all about the money and that they spend money on things that aren't necessary. I think everybody can agree on that.
Certainly. And you can see that. I
Yeah.
mean, and it just by the same token, you can say that there's churches out there where there's a pastor who is just trying to drum up the most wide open liberal sermon that he can come up with.
Sure.
That completely undermines all the authority of God in our lives, just to tell people what they want to hear, to draw more people to his congregation, to get more money.
Yeah.
In the end, it's mostly all about money and power.
Well, and I want to add something. You may be a little smarter than I'm giving you credit for as far as taking up the 10 hours, because I think you laid down the foundation earlier on this interview about discernment, right?
Well, I'd be hesitant and cautious on the smarter than any credit.
Okay.
But yeah, let's reserve judgment.
But no,
on that.
but we keep going back to some of these points that you made.
Yeah.
But the discernment, you know, if you do leave meetings and you go to another church, you have to be very discerning on that the word is being spoken, the true and biblical word, and that, you know, one of the things that I always like to ask if we move somewhere and we're checking out some churches is, hey, are you debt free? Because that will tell you a little bit about
how they operate.
Yeah. And the other thing is with a regular, we'll call it a regular church, a non-Friends and Workers church, is that they're nonprofits and that you can look at their spending report and you can see that it's all laid out. And is there churches that abuse that? Absolutely. I'm not saying that all of them are, you know, but okay. So going back to this shadowy funds.
Well, yeah. So in my own experience, the name that you mentioned that has become infamous because of letters, because of the letter released by my younger brother, which I then kind of tried to make some couple little corrections to, and from my own older perspective on the more immediate situation, that was my own experience. I lived through that. Witnessing. Now, none of the friends would have been okay with what was going on had they known.
Hey, let's sit down on these rocks here. And
that's perfect. Hash that over.
Yeah. This is beautiful.
Isn't it? This is one of my favorite hiking trails, and it's one of my favorite hiking trails because it's almost never occupied.
Yeah.
It's much less occupied.
All right, I'm on the tall rock and he's on the short rock.
Perfect.
So
life is in order.
Yeah, feel a little better.
Good. But yeah, so to go back to that, you know, none of the friends who had given of their substance would have been okay with people being left out in the cold on financial responsibilities that they thought they were contributing to. I mean, that's putting it as bluntly as possible, because they would give all that they could. I know that there were many who have probably given as much as that widow and her two mites. And
so you're referring to giving to the ministry, giving to the workers?
Correct. I think that's kind of always been the standard. And I
Okay.
mean, some of your other interviewees kind of spoke to that better than I ever could, because, again, it's rather shadowy. You know? All I know was that in terms of initial promises, there was going to be help. There was a very godly man who initially approached my parents, and it was he understood they didn't have means, that they were going to need help with those burdens.
Okay, so this was before they before they purchased the convention grounds?
Correct.
Okay.
Because they actually purchased it at the request of the workers for the purpose of convention.
Okay, do you know about what year that was?
80.
1980.
I think it was 1980.
So the workers asked them
Might have been, yeah, 1980.
to buy a place that a convention grounds could be built on.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, they were approached by Leslie Olson, who's gone now.